In the annals of Hollywood, few names glitter as brightly as Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, or MGM. A titan of the silver screen, MGM was a dream factory, where stars were born and legends made. Its roaring lion logo heralded cinematic masterpieces that defined generations. But like the grandest of empires, even MGM was not immune to the tides of change and the follies of man. Once, MGM was synonymous with Hollywood itself, a studio that didn't just make movies. It created dreams, defined eras, and owned the stars. Its lion's roar was a clarion call, heralding cinematic wonders. MGM Story is one of pioneering achievements, of setting standards for a burgeoning industry. Yet, behind the glamour and the red carpets lay a tale of corporate gambles, strategic missteps, and a struggle to keep up with a rapidly changing world. MGM Story is a saga of splendor, innovation, and artistic triumph. Yet, it's also a tale tinged with irony, where ambition meets misfortune, and success leads to an unexpected downfall. A story of how a beacon of the film industry lost its way amidst shifting sands of technology, market dynamics, and, most critically, the very human element of greed and misjudgment. This is the story of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, a cinematic giant whose roar once echoed across the globe, now a whisper in the annals of film history. This story is about a movie company, a living legend that was turned into a hospitality business and almost made into a burger joint. Enjoy the movie. Rewind to the early 20th century, an era where cinema was more than entertainment. It was a cultural revolution. In this golden age, MGM stood as a colossus. With its iconic Leo the Lion logo, MGM wasn't just a studio, it was the dream factory where stars were born and legends made. Founded in 1924, MGM quickly became a symbol of cinematic excellence. It was a place where talent, technology, and storytelling converged to create magic. Legends like Greta Garbo, Clark Gable, and Judy Garland called MGM home. Here, classics like The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind were born, capturing hearts and setting standards in filmmaking. The studio's philosophy was simple yet grand: more stars than there are in heaven. And true to its word, MGM's constellation of stars shone the brightest. It was an era where creativity and commerce danced in perfect harmony. Under the visionary leadership of Louis B. Mayer and Irving Thalberg, MGM was not just creating films. It was sculpting culture, shaping dreams, and etching its legacy in the annals of time. But as we will see, even the brightest stars fade, and empires, no matter how grand, can crumble. MGM's story, much like its films, was destined for dramatic turns. It was an epic tale of triumph and tragedy, a reminder that in the fickle world of show business, today's king could be tomorrow's pauper. As the 1960s dawned, the winds of change began to howl through the corridors of Hollywood. MGM, the juggernaut of the film industry, faced a new era, one that it was ill-prepared to navigate. The studio, which once defined cinematic trends, now found itself trailing behind, struggling to keep pace with a rapidly evolving landscape. Television, once dismissed as a passing fad, emerged as a formidable rival, capturing audiences with the convenience of home entertainment. The once unassailable box office numbers of MGM began to falter, as the allure of the small screen drew viewers away from the grand theaters. The challenges were not just external. Internally, MGM grappled with a hierarchy resistant to change. The studio, steeped in tradition, found its age-old formulas for success losing relevance. Audience tastes were evolving, seeking realism and new narratives, a far cry from the escapist fantasies MGM was known for. MGM's response was tepid at best. Attempts to diversify and adapt came, but they lacked conviction, often mired in the very traditions that once made the studio great. It was a paradox. The very elements that constituted MGM's identity were now its shackles, holding it back in a race it had once led with ease. As the studio's glittering successes became memories, the first cracks in the empire began to show. The golden era was waning, but the full extent of MGM's troubles was yet to unfold. The lion, once the king of the cinematic jungle, was facing an uncertain future, one that would test its survival in the ruthless world of show business. As the golden sun of MGM began to set, a series of leadership changes marked the beginning of an uncertain era. The once mighty studio, which had effortlessly commanded the box office, now found itself in a labyrinth of its own making, steered by a succession of leaders, each grappling with the shifting sands of the entertainment industry. First came Dora Sherry, succeeding Louis B. Mayer in 1951. Sherry, known for his success at RKO Pictures, tried to steer MGM through turbulent waters with a focus on lavish musicals. Despite some hits like Easter Parade and The Great Caruso, Sherry's tenure saw extravagant flops that weighed heavily on the studio's finances. His reign, marked by few genuine hits, ended in 1956, leaving behind a legacy of high costs and dwindling returns. The studio's foray into television, a realm it had long overlooked, began with the MGM Parade, a promotional show akin to Disney's Disneyland series, but this venture was short-lived, cancelled by 1956. MGM then shifted its focus, intending to distribute its films on TV and produce series based on its cinematic works, a move that showed promise but failed to match the impact of its silver screen endeavors. The sale of The Wizard of Oz TV rights to CBS in 1956, which became a televised tradition, was a rare success in an otherwise challenging transition. In the 1960s, the studio adopted a risky strategy, heavily investing in big-budget epics, hoping for box office gold. This approach brought success with Ben-Hur in 1959, but led to significant losses with several other high-stake projects. The failures of films like Cimarron and Mutiny on the Bounty precipitated the exit of executives Sol Siegel and Joseph Vogel, replaced by Robert M. Whiteman and Robert O'Brien. While this new leadership brought temporary relief with hits like Dr. Zhivago, their tenure was overshadowed by financial instability and box office failures. The 1970s saw Dan Melnick take the reins as head of production, bringing a glimmer of success with films like Westworld and Network. However, MGM's glory days were far behind, and the studio could never reclaim its former grandeur. In a symbolic shift, the company declared itself primarily a hotel company under Kerkorian in 1979, a stark departure from its cinematic roots. In 1969, businessman and investor Kirk Kerkorian bought 40% of MGM and dramatically changed the operation and direction of the studio. He hired new management, reduced the studio's output to about 5 films per year, and diversified its products, creating MGM Resorts International as a Las Vegas-based hotel and casino company, which it later divested in the 1980s. In 1980, the studio acquired United Artists. In 1986, Kerkorian sold MGM to Ted Turner, who retained the rights to the MGM Film Library, sold the studio lot in Culver City to Lorimar, and sold the remnants of MGM back to Kerkorian a few months later. After Kerkorian sold and reacquired the company again in the 1990s, he expanded MGM by purchasing Orion Pictures and the Samuel Goldwyn Company, including both of their film libraries. Finally, in 2004, Kerkorian sold MGM to a consortium that included Sony Pictures. Anyway, there have been so many changes with MGM that it's hard to figure out without a bottle of beer. The company was badly shaken up, and the decisions of some of its managers were, to put it mildly, questionable. Why buy a movie company and turn it into a hotel? That Kirk Kerkorian didn't have a place to stay. He could live in a warehouse between racks of old movies. And if he was hungry, would he turn the company into a burger joint? Stupid decision, honestly. The MGM lion, which once roared with authority and pride, now seemed to let out a faint cry, unheard in the cacophony of a changing industry. The stage was set for a downfall, one that was not just about box office numbers, but about losing an identity that had taken decades to build. As the shadows of the 70s and 80s loomed over Hollywood, the saga of MGM took a dramatic turn. The lion, once the symbol of cinematic dominance, now grappled with the vultures of financial distress. The studio's journey from the pinnacle of success to the depths of despair was not just a story of failed movies. It was a tale of financial misadventures and corporate takeovers that would leave the once mighty giant staggering. Debt began to pile up, like a scene from one of its tragic dramas. The profits that once flowed like rivers through MGM's coffers now trickled to a halt. The studio, desperate for a lifeline, found itself caught in the whirlwind of corporate takeovers. These were not the collaborations of mutual growth, they were bids of survival. each new owner trying to reshape MGM in their own image, yet failing to understand the essence of what made MGM. In the relentless tides of time, even fallen giants attempt to rise. MGM, amidst its sea of troubles, made several attempts to reclaim its former glory. This chapter in the MGM saga was marked by desperate attempts at revival, each echoing with the hope of a comeback. The studio, once a dream factory, turned to new genres, new talents, hoping to capture the magic that had once been its hallmark. There were moments of brilliance, fleeting successes that hinted at a possible renaissance. Yet, these were mere sparks in a long-dimmed flame. The challenges were too deep-rooted, the identity too fractured. MGM's struggles mirrored the trials of a protagonist in one of its classic films, battling against overwhelming odds, seeking redemption. But unlike its cinematic tales, there was no scripted climax leading to triumph. The studio's efforts were often undercut by an industry that had moved on, by an audience that had changed, and by a legacy that was both a blessing and a curse. In the final act of MGM's story, we find not a resurgence, but a quiet acceptance of a new role. The studio, once the king of Hollywood, now navigates a landscape where its roar is but a whisper among many. MGM's journey is not just a story of rise and fall, but a reflection on the transient nature of glory. Today, MGM's legacy lives on, not just in its iconic films, but in the lessons it imparts. It stands as a testament to the relentless march of time and innovation, reminding us that even titans can falter when they fail to evolve. The MGM of old, a beacon of cinematic excellence, is now a chapter in Hollywood's history, a story told to a new generation of filmmakers and cinephiles. In the annals of film history, MGM's tale is both a cautionary one and a source of inspiration. Its legacy teaches us the importance of adapting to change, of evolving with the times. As the curtains close on this tale, we remember MGM not just for its fall, but for the heights it once reached, for the dreams it spun into cinematic gold. Rest in peace, MGM. Your story will be told for generations to come.